letting folks in the room.
There we go. A couple more people joining us right now. We'll get started after we see them in the room with us.
Yeah, there's a flow coming in right now. So we're just gonna hold up a minute. Happy Loving Day to everybody. We all love you for choosing to spend time with us on this wonderful day. We've got a nice purple theme, as always, going along with our day today.
All right, I think we're going to get started. So thank you again for joining us. Today we will be spending our Love Day, our Valentine's Day, talking about some self-reflection. So as usual, feel free to use the chat box to introduce yourself, ask or answer a question, share an idea or a connection you see, or perhaps hyperlink a resource that you think might be useful to others in our Zoom. And as you're using the chat box, be sure that you're sending it to the person that you would like to get it, whether you want to send it directly to someone or to everyone in the Zoom. Here is our team. You will see all of us somewhere in the Zoom. Today, Wyatt and I will be facilitating, but we will have Shamron, Elisa, and Elise on the back channels. And our newest friend, Sylvia, will also be there. So you'll see them working the chats and dropping links during our time together. So thinking about our Love Day, we wanted to start with this quote by Helen Keller. The best and most beautiful things in the world cannot be seen or even touched. They must be felt with the heart. So just take a moment and think about, what are you loving today? And feel free to drop it in the chat. What are you loving today? It could be a person, it could be a place, it could be a thing. What are you loving today? I love the chocolate cupcake I just ate. Got flowers and they weren't from Vaughn's, colleagues, team, learning, sunshine and connecting with others. Collective passion around education from all. Awesome. Beautiful weather.
34 years, Fred. That's
wow.
Wonderful. That's amazing.
That is amazing. Teammates.
Oh, thank you, Stacy.
Can we reflect on Fred's? Can we reflect on Fred's? Can we have like a webinar just on Fred, dissecting that a bit, friend?
Yeah, that would be great. Any tools you can share, Fred?
Anything?
Well, when you mentioned putting on the brakes every once in a while, definitely you got to do that. Look for the signals. Be sure you know the traffic lights are blinking at you, and pay attention.
Love it. Love it. Thank you, Fred.
Anticipate barriers is what I hear you saying. Anticipating barrier, design options.
Designing options too.
Got it.
Yep.
Got it. Writing that down.
All right.
It's great.
Stacy, we're loving on your son today too, Stacy. Thank you so much for sharing that. That's exactly what we're trying to be in service of. Some clouds, and we have some too in San Jose today. It is fun. Something to look at up there.
We need some clouds. We need some of the rain too. Before we jump into our learning together, we just wanted to share the documents that we are providing that will support your learning and participation in our webinar together today. Those should be dropped into the chat if you haven't already been able to grab them. They'll be there again. We're going to give you just a minute to think about how you can set up your learning environment to better support your engagement. And think about what is the best way for you to perceive the content, and then what are your preferences today for how you're going to share your thinking?
Yeah, I'm on a webinar now.
So we're going to give you a minute to get those documents ready. If you want to use the note-taking guide, open that up. Perhaps open up the self-reflection template. I'm going to show you what that looks like just in case. If you haven't used one of these before, you're going to click on use template and it will open up, and that's how you will have your own version of the self-reflection template.
And then as you're preparing, we also want to note and thank, we have our live captioner, Lisa, with us.
Oh,
so
thank you.
if you would like to access the live transcript for our webinar this afternoon, evening, wherever you are in the world, you can access it by looking at your Zoom toolbar at the bottom. There should be a CC button that says live transcript. And if you click on that button, you will see Lisa furiously trying to capture everything that we're saying in the webinar. So we're grateful for Lisa and also for our colleague Ali that's helping run the back channels as well.
I wanted to stop that before you heard the really awful siren. And I also wanted to welcome or acknowledge those of you who are participating in our webinar at a future date, so asynchronously. We are so appreciative of those of you who go back to the recordings and take the webinar when it meets your needs. And that's why we do record everything. So we want to acknowledge you as well. So thank you for participating. As we start our time together, we wanted to just kind of think about our working definition of inclusive literacy. So when we think about inclusion, the basic definition of inclusion is the process of involving or including all people in an environment, regardless of their differences. And so as we do think this is the basic definition of inclusion, we want to add to that we also want to be sure that it includes belonging, valuing, and respecting. It's not just having everyone physically together. We want to make sure all of those components are added, the belonging, valuing, and respecting. And then as we look at our definition of literacy, same idea, starting with a basic definition, the ability to produce, interpret, and understand language. But we want to, as we consider our work together, really thinking about adding to literacy, ensuring that we're focusing on the idea of questioning, critiquing, and then the social context around literacy as well. So we started our webinar series, Designing for Inclusive Literacy in September. In September, we started by thinking about how we can work on our mindset and really specifically in the component of language and thinking about barriers being in the design and really thinking about how can we minimize those barriers for our learners. And then we went through the inclusive literacy by design process. So in October, we started by talking about setting clear, rigorous goals, November, anticipating barriers based on variability, and December, designing options to minimize those barriers. Then we connected all of that learning to the idea of expert learning. So why do we design this way? We design this way because we want to support our learners to be expert learners. And today, as we go through our webinar, we'll be making connections back to our previous webinar and really thinking about how does self-reflection support expert learning. So here we are in our, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, our 6th webinar on self-reflection. And our goals for our session today are participants will deepen understanding of inclusive literacy practices by exploring the significance of self-reflection in service of developing expert learning and exploring design options for self-reflection. So we wanted to start our time together with a quote that I'm sure most of you have seen before by John Dewey. We do not learn from experience. We learn from reflecting on experience. So we're going to have lots of opportunities to reflect today throughout our session.
Becky, after we put that quote into this presentation, I couldn't stop reflecting on the first moment that I heard that quote. And it is really powerful thought. So today we are going to dive in with taking a look at the expert learners, as we feel that the end goal of educating learners is to help support them in growing into expert learners. Expert learners are people who are empowered to be able to advocate for what they need to be most effective in gaining knowledge. They know what they need, and then they can seek those things to help themselves become the best that they can be. This table explains the habits and behaviors of expert learners. So in service of accessibility, we will be reading to you the habits and practices of expert learners out loud. So the habits and practices of being engaged, learners who are purposeful and motivated. They are eager for new learning, and they are motivated by the mastery of learning itself. They are goal-directed in their learning. They know how to set challenging learning goals for themselves. They know how to sustain the effort and resilience that reaching those goals will require. They know how to monitor and regulate emotional reactions that would be impediments or distractions to successful learning.
So I'm looking at the representation principle. Expert learners are resourceful and knowledgeable learners that consider prior knowledge to make connections to prior learning experiences. They activate that prior knowledge to identify, organize, prioritize, and assimilate new information. They recognize the tools and resources that would help find structure and remember new information. And they know how to transform new information into meaningful and usable knowledge.
And the last principle around action and expression of expert learners, they are strategic and goal-directed learners. They formulate plans for learning. They devise effective strategies and tactics to optimize learning. They organize resources and tools to facilitate learning. They monitor their progress, recognize their strengths and weaknesses as learners, and abandon plans and strategies that are ineffective. So we invite you to consider these 3 guiding questions throughout the webinar today to reflect on what we are learning about reflection. Whoa, it's really meta, friends. Reflecting on reflecting. So the 3 guiding questions for us today are, how is self-reflection necessary in helping to grow expert learners? So you have that table that we just went over. How are we going to build connections there? Where do we see connections between the habits and practices of expert learners and self-selection? We are going to circle back at the end of the webinar. We're going to ask you to share any connections that you experienced during our time together. So I am going to give you 1 minute right now to dive into that table on expert learners and reflect on what you're reading, try to make some meaning of it in your minds, and try to build any connections that you can come up with already to these guiding questions. So you have a spot on your template that we gave you at the very bottom of the template, because this will also happen at the very end of today's webinar. So if you want to take a moment right now, I'll give you 1 minute, read these things on the table and see if you can jot down any thoughts at all. All right, we will pause there. And I just want to remind you that you'll have that document throughout today. So if you're building any more connections as we go ahead and jot them down. All right, moving on, we have a cycle. We consider this expert learning cycle. Is it showing on the screen?
Yeah, we can see it says set a goal right now.
It's animated.
Ah, I see. Thank you. I couldn't see that. Thank you. So we consider this expert learning cycle to be a continuous and iterative cycle. It helps to build and strengthen the habit of mind and body as we become stronger and stronger expert learners in our life. As we go, it deepens our self-knowledge around these skills. So we always start with setting a goal. Expert learners know how to set goals. And then as they are working towards that goal, the learner learns how to make decisions about how to best reach that goal, and being really reflective and conscious of these choices that they're making. Then they can monitor that progress towards that goal. What worked for me? What didn't work for me? This was very helpful. This was not. And then always reflecting on the process that they went through. And then we'll continually iterate throughout this cycle for life, really, as we learn, because more tools are coming out every day. And so we always have new things to try, new people to connect with, new ideas to grapple with, and new spaces and places to learn in. So we never give up on this as we continue to grow and grow into more and more expert learners. All right. So we are going to start our activity now, friends. We are asking you to think of a goal. We are working on goals and self-reflection, you yourselves with us. So we want you to think of a goal that you have set for yourself in your life or in your work life. So something personal or something professional. You also have the choice to consider a learner that you work with or have worked with in the past and a goal that they were or are working towards. And we're going to ask you to reflect or journal about this for 1 minute. I'll put on the timer again. So if you want to go back to that template that we had, you'll see at the very top of the template, the goals and self-reflection is the space that we'll be in now. All right, so I'm going to stop talking. I'm going to give you, 3 minutes to think of this person or a goal in your own life, and go ahead and journal it out. Lean in. I was reflecting that whole time myself, and like one thought that came to mind is how many people the timer is helpful for and the timer is not helpful for some. Some people are constantly thanking me for using the timer. Others say that it stresses them out. This is an expert behavior, that they are communicating to me what's working for them. And when friends say that the timer stresses them out, I just say, okay, close the screen, right? Just like minimize that window. It was interesting. I also was sharing with Becky when I was saying earlier that we are always using new tools throughout our life. Here I am, 43 years old, and I just came up with this new reflecting tool for the end of my weeks and start of my next week. So Sunday evening, I have this whole new reflecting and goal setting thing that I'm doing for myself. And I was telling Becky, I know the environment that I need. I know the tools that are working best for me, the music that I want on. And it has really made my weeks for the last few weeks so much more comfortable, effective. It's got better flow. So I think that this really is a lifelong learner stance. And this is exactly what we want to help grow in the learners that we have opportunity to work with. What process, strategy, or tool supported you or your learner with setting that goal? For me, it was having my essential oils diffusing, music, and a special doodling journal. I also got myself some really nice markers with a fine tip. Boom. I identified the things that I need. What about you, friends? Can you turn on your mics or throw in the chat? What's a tool that was working for you or the learner that you were reflecting on? Ooh, I love this. So Shelley, set up sub goals or steps along the way. Yes, friend, to break a big goal into manageable steps. Shelley, that's exactly what I'm doing on my Sunday journaling. I'm taking it day by day, minute by minute, putting reminders on the calendar. Oh, thank you. Those are very expert learning behaviors. Given the time to reflect on a goal. Shamron, that's so true. We don't often give ourselves time for this. And I always want to name when I was having opportunity to serve as an educator in the classroom, I oftentimes was that person that wanted to get that one more thing in that math lesson, that one more concept, instead of owning that, pausing, letting it go till the next day, and taking time to reflect might have been the most important step for that learner. I wish I could go back in time.
I see some other things in the chat too. Elise said restating in own words. Fred makes a list and feels accomplished when he completes the task. I also love a check off for sure.
Sometimes I add things even after I've done them just so I can cross them off.
I've done that many times. Cece said she has a daily check-in with herself. Tried different times of day to exercise until finding the perfect time. Exactly. An expert learning, abandoning plans or strategies that don't work and finding the one that does work for you. Not worrying about what other people think of your goal.
Oh, I love that. Positive affirmations when you meet your goal.
Yeah.
That's another thing that I need to work on more too. Thanks for the reminder.
Yeah, sharing goal makes you accountable.
Dan, still feel I'm working hard.
Love this. Knowing that sometimes things work for a while, but as situations change, might need a new strategy. I super duper connect with that. Thank you, Michelle. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, that is great. And then it kind of goes along with what Lisa wrote, asking myself, what does your brain need right now? And what does your heart need right now? So it's that idea of the right now. Sometimes it changes the context.
Dan, I'm going to consider this student as we move through the webinar as well. I'm really, really happy that you named this because when your student goes to reflect, he goes straight to frustration. That's an important thing to put out there. Thank you, Dan. Any thoughts, advice, or ideas for Dan throughout this webinar I think would be helpful.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, friends.
Yeah, that was awesome reflections. Thank you. And like Wyatt said, we're going to be doing lots of reflecting today. So we first wanted to give you the opportunity to think about your own goal setting or that you've already done with a learner. And then we wanted to make the connections to the classroom. So how do we support self-reflection in the classroom? What is our role as the educator? What is our role as the designer to design opportunities to support this expert learning cycle for our learners? So we know that set a goal is the first stage, the first part of our cycle. And we want to think about as the designer in the classroom, what do we do to support that in our students? So one thing is designer crafts and articulates clear, relevant goal and facilitates personal goal setting. So that's our role in this part of the cycle. And then we wanted to share some considerations, some things you might think about how you can do this in the classroom. So when we're thinking about setting goals as educators, as the designer, we can craft goals that are clear and discrete, flexible, challenging, and rigorous. We can display the goal in multiple ways to ensure that our learners really understand what the goal is. We can prompt learners to set personal goals, encourage division of long-term goals into short-term objectives. And we saw that as some of our strategies when the responses in the chat. We can use prompts or scaffolds for visualizing the desired outcome, provide models that demonstrate what meeting the goal looks like. For example, sharing assessment checklists, scoring rubrics, annotated student work or performance examples. Because of course, we really want our learners to understand, what does that goal mean? What does it look like to be successful with that goal? So again, just some considerations for how we can support our learners with this specific part of the expert learning cycle, setting a goal.
All right, fabulous. So we're going to dive right back into our activity as we are going through the expert learning self-reflecting cycle and reflecting on it while we do it. So next step, we need to make a plan. We need to make a plan. So the questions at hand, and I think maybe we'll give 2 minutes this time, because as I was looking at the questions right now, I think we've actually already hit on sharing out on some of them. So we'll cut it at 1 minute on the timer, Becky. How did you or your learner make a plan to reach that goal? What helped you or your learner decide what would work best for you or what wouldn't work for you? And how did you or your learner know when you reached it? Okay, so we'll give you 2 minutes. Continue your reflection. Next section on your template. Can't wait to hear out from you. Mute or in the chat. Thank you for your reflection again. What process, strategy, and/or tool supported you or your learner with making a plan? How do we make a plan? We've got a goal. How do we make a plan? What thoughts do we have here? Backwards planning. I see, Allison. Works for me too, friend. Yes. So starting with the end in mind and then going back and identifying milestones along the way. Perfect. Yep. I always have to, everything I do, ever since I understood this process of how to plan in education, I now plan my life that way. I start with the end in mind for everything. Yeah, I agree. I'm loving this conversation around this student with Dan. It's making me reflect a lot too. It's also making me reflect on raising my kids and how I need to celebrate small wins along the way with my kids more, maybe.
I think as a classroom teacher, I was always feeling pressed to move on, finish the lesson, move on to the next topic. And I don't feel like I did a very good job of building that in or modeling it for my students.
And I was doing it myself the whole time. And why didn't I know to share that with them and grow that within them? Yeah, so important.
Yeah, I think about as teachers or any capacity when we're teaching or doing something, we're constantly asking ourselves, did that work? What could have gone better? Where was a barrier? I wish that I had been more intentional. I wish that I knew then what I know now.
I know. Hey, Stacy, I love that last sentence there. I've also given myself permission to not be perfect. Thank you. I am continually working that every 10 minutes of my life right now. And it's something that I wasn't taught. And so we want to consider that, especially when thinking about that student with Dan, right? Really helping that student to understand doesn't have to be perfect. All right, nice ideas, friends.
Yes,
Killing
thank
it.
you. Definitely. All right, so let's consider and think about now putting our reflections and our ideas into the classroom. So how, as educators, how as the designer of instruction, can we design to support learners in making decisions about meeting their goals? So one thing we want to consider is how can we outline multiple learning pathways? So we know that there's not one way that's going to work best for all of our learners. So some considerations to support our learners in making a plan are to model the process of planning by thinking aloud, really making that planning visible for our learners, embedding prompts to stop and think before acting. So really slowing it down so that our learners have that opportunity to kind of plan it out and think before acting. Include opportunities for learners to revisit the plan throughout the learning process. So it's not just something at the very beginning, then we go and check it off at the end, but really providing those stopping points throughout the process. Supporting our learners with some checklists and planning templates to guide their planning. And then that idea that we mentioned a couple of times in the chat as well, supporting learners in breaking long-term goals into reachable short-term objectives. So making them more attainable and maybe seeming a little bit less scary, more reasonable to achieve.
All right, so now that we have our plan, we need to reflect on that progress monitoring, what Becky was just reminding us of, that we have these milestones identified along the way that we can have as checkpoints to check in and see how we're doing in service of the end goal. So some questions to consider. How did you or your learner track progress towards the goal? How often was self-reflection on progress helpful as well? What tools work for you or your learner to help you keep track of progress and consider next steps? So if this has worked for me, that means this is potentially how I look at the next step, sort of thing. All right, back to that reflecting doc. I'd say Bex, maybe 2 minutes on this one again. Okay, can't wait to hear out from you. Mic off. Either way, you would like to share out what process, strategy, and or tool supported you or your learner that you're reflecting on with monitoring progress. What do we got? Oops. Daily check-ins. I love it. Oh, yes, I love a visual. I love a good visual.
Or a habit tracker. I love that.
Yes, friend. Cognitive journals. Yes. I really wish I did that in the classroom.
Yeah, building it into the day, actually having several checkpoints throughout the day, probably on a personal level, but definitely in a design of a classroom setting where I can be more intentional with that.
Mm-hmm.
One of my favorite questions asked by one of my coaches to me was, I was super frustrated, math teacher, blah, blah, blah. And she said, Elisa, the last time you taught this, what was happening? That it went well, air quotes on what that might mean, what was happening? And so giving me an opportunity to go back to my last time that I felt successful at that thing that I was wrestling with was really helpful. It helped me get unstuck, if that makes sense. Because sometimes it's like, I don't know where to start, right? If I'm thinking about designing, yeah.
Yeah, that's a great point, Elisa.
Gwen, exactly. We need options, right? Different ways for students to self-reflect and progress monitor. For me, accessibility partners work really, really well. Having a check-in with them often to see where I'm at on my journey.
I love all the options that I'm seeing people talk about in the chat, but also in our discussion, because some people are external processors. Some people need that quiet time to gather their thoughts. Some are a combination of both. I'm seeing some great ideas popping up in the chat with even a rubric for self-reflection, allowing kind of a scale for, especially if we're working with younger kids that may not have the language to capture it quite at that time. I love that idea of providing some of those scaffolds for them to think about that. Super inspired by kind of the thinking and ideas that are popping up. I want to make sure that we copy the chat content and let's include it on our home base document so folks can make sure to go back to the great resources that are there too.
Yeah, we've had some really great suggestions. I'm wondering why we're even providing our design considerations, because I feel like we're already getting such great suggestions from the participants or from the group. So
we're just getting volunteers for next fall. We're good. We're taking notes. We're taking notes.
Yeah, great point. Exactly. So again, I think we've probably covered on all the best considerations or strategies of how we can design to support our learners in monitoring progress towards the goal, but we'll talk through it anyways. So like we said, the designer needs to be intentional in providing ways to support learners to monitor progress. We know it's not a natural thing for learners to do, so we need to provide the time and the space and the strategies for that. And we also need to ensure that we're giving feedback throughout the process and then supporting reflection on the process as well. So some things to consider to support monitoring progress. So asking those guiding questions for self-monitoring, providing feedback to learners, and then also incorporating some opportunities for peer feedback, embedding prompts to show and explain your work. So some opportunities, perhaps portfolio reviews, art critiques, some of that visuals we were talking about, show representations of progress, Could be before and after photos, graphs and charts showing progress over time, or incorporating a process portfolio. Provide differentiated models of self-assessment strategies. Just like Shamron said, we all kind of respond differently. We're variable, we know. So for some, it might be nice to have some role-playing thinking about self-assessment, video reviews, peer feedback, providing assessment checklists, scoring rubrics, and multiple examples of annotated student work and performance examples also really guide our learners in knowing where it is that we want them to be. What does it really look like to meet that goal? If learners don't understand what it looks like to meet that goal, they won't be able to monitor their progress.
Okay, so friends, as I'm looking over these questions that we had set out, I feel like we have really, due to your amazing participation today and really leaning into this, I think we could probably cut this one down to just a minute. I think we've named a lot of it. So right now we're working on the reflection of the reflecting. So how did you or your learner reflect on the progress towards mastery of the goal? How did reflecting help you or your learner in reaching the goal? What tools were helpful to use to reflect? And how often was it helpful to reflect? All right, back to your document. Take some notes, and in a moment, we'll hear out from you in the chat. Okay, friends, fabulous. So what process, strategy, and what tool supported you or your learner with reflecting on your progress? We've named a bunch of them. Is there anything else that's come up? One more moment to reflect about it. Oh, that's an interesting thought, Deirdre. Thank you for this tip, as I'm about to have a middle schooler in a year, that they need to really reflect on their own about how much work they did at home on their own without the parents being all helicopter parenty. Yeah, I needed that reminder. Thank you. Fred, that tracker is awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that. Like we were saying, constant new tools out there to try. So this is why it's an iterative process. Listen to ourselves more.
Oops, sorry about that. I am really having a hard time keeping the slide straight today. I see in the chat, Elise was sharing a strategy to FISTA 5. So helping our youngest students just kind of starting with like a numeric way of self-reflecting, really modeling that process. Okay, so let's jump into the last kind of portion of our cycle, thinking about how do we support our learners in reflecting on the process. So just like the last step, designers giving feedback and supporting reflection on the process, it kind of goes in both areas. And then we start thinking about how we move into setting up new goals and adopting new goals. Like Wyatt said, this is a continuous cycle. So we're going to think about how we can help our learners reflect on the process. So again, that, what was it? Saying the quiet out loud. I love that phrase. I'm always saying thinking aloud, but Jillian shared saying the quiet out loud. So I think that's going to be my new catchphrase, really that idea of modeling, making the invisible visible for our learners. So we want to do that with self-reflection by thinking aloud. We want to ask questions to guide self-reflection. We need to make sure that we provide those opportunities for learners to stop and reflect throughout the learning process. That it's not just, again, at the very beginning or the very end, that we're supporting our learners throughout the entire process. And then thinking about what are the tools that we can use to support self-reflection. So templates, visuals, or graphic organizers that could guide self-reflection on process.
Okay, friends, so we're circling right back as we said we would at the beginning. And what we're asking us to do is go to those guiding questions on the next slide. We're trying to connect those expert learner practices, habits, behaviors to these questions. So how is self-reflection necessary in helping to grow expert learners, to bring out those behaviors, habits, and practices on that table? Where do we see connections between the habits and practices of an expert learner and self-reflection? And what did this process that we just went through with you here today, right now, show you about yourself as an expert learner? All right, we actually have time for a breakout option. So if we wanted to set that up as an option, we'll also be right here. You can stay in the main room and chat with us.
How much time do you want for those breakout rooms?
I'd say 5, Becky, does that sound good?
Yeah, that's plenty because we'll be wrapping up. Yeah.
Okay, and we've got about 5 rooms. I'm hoping that we maybe have like 3 to 5 people in each room. Will lend itself well. And if we could get those guided questions plopped in the chat so folks have a visual, but also use those breakout rooms for what you need. Process the information with colleagues in the room. You know, take the time you need to support your learning where you are in this process. And I'll go ahead and open those rooms for us right now. We'll wait just a few minutes. Our breakout rooms are going to be popping back in the next probably 30 to 40 seconds. So I love this. It's fun to be a participant today.
Oh, good, good. All right, welcome back, friends. I think
Wow.
everyone is back in the room.
Amazing.
Hopefully-
I just threw in the chat a tool that Jennifer from my breakout had shared. I think I am going to be purchasing this one. It's called The One Thing. And she was saying that it helps you basically backwards map a year. Look at a yearly goal, then it helps you break it down to a month, and then from month to day, da, 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 da. And she said she's finding it super helpful. So thank you so much, Jennifer.
Wow, great. And thanks for sharing it in the chat for us. So as we start to wrap up our afternoon together, we wanted to leave you with another quote from John C. Maxwell. Reflective thinking turns experience into insight. So we're hoping that our time together helped to develop some insight for you. We also wanted to share some additional resources that our team has created to support self-reflection. On our website, you'll see the link there. It'll be dropped in the chat. You'll see that we have 4 different ways to engage in the topic of self-reflection. We have our Got a Minute learning modules. We have a featured resource from the Learning Designed platform. We have a top tips sheet, which I believe was dropped into the chat earlier, that supports self-reflection. And then we also have the place to register for our next webinar, which will be literacy across the content areas. So each month we have a different theme, and we produce and share 4 different ways to engage in that topic. So next month's topic is literacy across disciplines. The webinar will be on March 14th, so 1 month from today. The registration is available there. And then we also have our feedback for today's session. We really do look closely at the feedback that is shared with us. It really helps us in our design of our future webinars. So please take the time to fill that out. It's really, really helpful for us. And then if there's any additional comments, please add them in there too, because we, like I said, we do all look at them and we look at them very closely. Thank you again for participating. You were such amazing participants today.
Yeah.
Elisa is working on adding the links to the home base document, and we'll put a link to the chat as well, because there were so many great ideas, suggestions, and tools shared in the chat today.
You know, I just want to say that in my last breakout, someone, Jennifer, I think was, no, sorry, I can't remember who it was, but she shared that today, the time, simply the time to go through this process, this protected time was exactly what she needed to remind herself to provide this protected time. And so thank you for sharing this loving day with reflecting with us.
Oh, that's so great to hear. What great feedback. Thank you. And then if you're interested in more things or anything and everything UDL, please visit the CAST's website, and here's some additional links for their professional learning, their books, and then how to contact CAST. But we just wanted to be able to see everyone before we sign off. Thank you so much for joining us on a Monday afternoon, which may or may not have been a holiday for you. And thank you for sharing part of your love day with us. We truly appreciate it, and we love all of you. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, we're happy to hang out. We have a few more minutes. So if you'd like to hang out or have some questions, we are definitely here. We love to chat. We love seeing you. Such an honor to share this space and this day with everyone. Thanks so much for being here.
Yeah, thank you. Take care, everyone. Stay safe and healthy.